Do you remember being held down on the edge of the bed while somebody's warm hands rubbed something strong and sharp smelling all over your chest, and you fought it, but by morning you could breathe again? That smell, that specific, unforgettable smell. Half the people watching this right now just felt something shift in their chest because that memory doesn't live in your mind. It lives in your body. And what if I told you that the things they were doing in those kitchens and back bedrooms, the things doctors called superstition, the things that got laughed at in waiting rooms? What if the science caught up? What if the remedies your grandfather swore by, the ones passed down in mason jars and whispered between women at church, turned out to be some of the most pharmacologically sound healing protocols ever documented? Today, we're exploring 25 home remedies from Black households of the 1960s that doctors now admit actually work. Let's start with the one that was in almost every kitchen in America: honey. Just honey, stirred into warm water with a squeeze of fresh lemon, given to a coughing child before bed. It sounds almost too simple to be medicine. And for decades, pediatricians pushed dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in Robitussin, as the gold standard for children's coughs, while parents who reached for the honey jar were quietly made to feel behind the times. Then, in 2007, Dr. Ian Paul at Penn State enrolled 105 children between the ages of 2 and 18 in a clinical study, and what he found stopped the medical world cold. Buckwheat honey was not just comparable to dextromethorphan, it outperformed it. Cough frequency, cough severity, for sleep quality. Honey won across every category. By 2018, a Cochrane systematic review of 6 randomized controlled trials involving 899 children confirmed it officially. Grandma had been right for generations before anyone thought to ask her why. The World Health Organization had already quietly recommended honey for children's coughs back in 2001. The science didn't discover this. It just finally caught up to the kitchen. And while we're talking about things that lived in the kitchen, garlic, raw, pungent, make your eyes water garlic, 1 or 2 cloves, maybe crushed into food, maybe eaten raw, maybe brewed into a sharp-smelling tea that children would negotiate desperately to avoid. Grandpa called it medicine. Doctors called it folklore. Then researchers ran the numbers. A meta-analysis of 17 randomized controlled trials found that garlic reduced systolic blood pressure by an average of 16.3 millimeters of mercury and diastolic pressure by 9.3, figures that rival prescription antihypertensives. The mechanism is now understood completely. Allicin, the compound released when garlic is crushed, stimulates nitric oxide production, inhibits the angiotensin-converting enzyme, and promotes vasodilation through hydrogen sulfide. Those are not folk medicine words. Those are pharmacology words, and they describe exactly what was happening every time a grandfather pressed a raw clove onto the back of his tongue and chased it with water. Now think about ginger, not the powder in the spice rack, the real thing. A knob of fresh ginger root, sliced thin. Always steeped in water so hot it steamed up the whole kitchen, poured into a mug that warmed both hands, given to anyone with a turning stomach, a queasy child on a long car ride, a woman in the early weeks of pregnancy who couldn't keep breakfast down. A 2024 double-blind randomized controlled trial confirmed that standardized ginger significantly reduced chemotherapy-induced nausea in cancer patients. A Cochrane review found it beneficial for pregnancy nausea. The mechanism involves compounds called 6-gingerol and 6-shogal, which block the same serotonin receptors targeted by ondansetron, a prescription anti-nausea drug that costs upwards of $40 per pill. The ginger root cost a quarter. It always worked. They always knew. Let's talk about the saltwater gargle. Every sore throat, every scratchy morning, every cold that announced itself with that telltale rawness at the back of the throat, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in warm water, gargled deep and long 3 or 4 times a day. Children fought it. The gagging was theatrical. And yet, a 2005 randomized trial published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine studied 387 volunteers and found that regular water gargling reduced upper respiratory tract infections by 36%. A 2019 study found hypertonic saline gargling cut cold symptom duration by nearly 2 full days, reduced the amount of virus shed into the environment, and significantly lowered the use of over-the-counter medication. The CDC now recommends saltwater gargling for flu symptoms. The prescription was always free. The pharmacy was always the kitchen sink. Apple cider vinegar, vinegar in a jar, that sharp, amber liquid that smelled like something between a salad and a cleaning product. A tablespoon in a glass of water before meals. The family health tonic that got passed down alongside cast iron skillets and Sunday recipes. A 2025 systematic review of 7 clinical trials published in Frontiers in Nutrition found that apple cider vinegar significantly reduced fasting blood sugar by nearly 22 milligrams per deciliter and reduced HbA1c, the long-term blood sugar marker, by 1.5%. In communities where diabetes rates were elevated by generations of food insecurity and healthcare exclusion, this wasn't just wellness. It was survival strategy. Then there was castor oil. If honey was beloved, castor oil was dreaded. Thick, pale yellow, tasting of nothing good, administered by the tablespoon, sometimes hidden in orange juice or Pepsi, and producing a reaction in children that bordered on theatrical collapse. But that same oil, pressed against the abdomen in a warm flannel pack, did something remarkable. Modern research has confirmed that ricinoleic acid, the primary fatty acid in castor oil, activates the same cellular pathways as capsaicin, producing documented anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects. It is still an FDA-approved laxative. The compound that made every child in the household miserable was in fact pharmacologically real. Vicks VapoRub, the blue jar. The smell alone is a time machine. Menthol and camphor and eucalyptus hitting the back of the throat before the lid was even all the way off. It went on the chest, on the back, on the throat, sometimes on the soles of the feet. And there was always a contingent of aunties who believed in a small dab under the nose. Some families added it to steaming water for inhalation. Others wrapped the child in a hot towel afterward to encourage sweating. A 2010 Penn State study of 138 children found that VapoRub significantly outperformed both petrolatum and no treatment on cough severity, congestion, and sleep quality. The active compound, camphor at 4.8%, menthol at 2.6, eucalyptus oil at 1.2, activate cold receptor nerve endings, creating the sensation of expanded airways. The 2023 literature even found VapoRub ingredients inhibit rhinoviral ATP release. The blue jar was real medicine all along. Chamomile tea came to the bedside last, poured from a small pot with dried flowers still drifting at the bottom, sweet with honey. With steam rising, pressed into the hands of someone who couldn't sleep, someone whose nerves were shot, someone carrying more than any one person should. The science behind it is elegant. Chamomile contains a flavonoid called apigenin, which binds to the same GABA A receptors as diazepam, the receptor family targeted by Valium and Xanax. A clinical trial found 1,500 milligrams of chamomile extract significantly reduced generalized anxiety disorder symptoms. Another found it measurably improved sleep quality in elderly patients. A meta-analysis of 12 randomized trials confirmed both effects. The cup of tea that felt like love was also molecule by molecule medicine. Cayenne pepper was for pain, mixed into warm water, gargled, spread as a paste with lard across achy joints. Say sprinkled into socks to warm cold feet. That burning heat was dismissed by mainstream medicine as mere irritation. But capsaicin, the active compound in cayenne, is now FDA approved for pain management. It works through TRPV1 receptors, temporarily overwhelming pain-sensing nerve fibers until they go quiet. An arthritis trial showed topical capsaicin cream reduced rheumatoid arthritis pain by 57%. An 8% capsaicin patch, Cutenza, is now a prescription treatment for post-shingles nerve pain. The paste on the back of the knee and the pharmaceutical patch are the same medicine, separated only by a century of gatekeeping. Clove oil, a whole clove pressed against the aching tooth, or a few drops on a cotton ball placed directly on the gum. And the numbing was almost instant, spreading outward in a warm chemical tide. The FDA once downgraded it from effective to inconclusive. Then a clinical trial showed clove gel was as effective as benzocaine for dental pain, and a French emergency dental study found eugenol, clove oil's active compound, more effective than articaine for pulpitis. It works by blocking voltage-gated sodium channels, the identical mechanism used by lidocaine. Eugenol is now an ingredient in FDA-compliant temporary fillings. What Grandpa kept in a small brown bottle was the same substance now pressed into commercial dental products worth billions of dollars. And then there was the aloe plant, always on a windowsill, always slightly leaning toward the light, always one broken stem away from being useful, a burn on the forearm from a cast iron skillet, a child's sunburn peeling at the shoulders, a wound that needed cooling, the thick gel pressed from the inside of a split leaf. Researchers have since confirmed that aloe vera is associated with wound healing times nearly 9 days shorter than standard care. One study found fresh aloe pulp outperformed silver sulfadiazine, the medical gold standard for burns, with 95% complete healing versus 83%. The compound responsible atsamonin promotes collagen synthesis and cellular regeneration. The plant on the windowsill was a clinic. It was tended without instruction manuals, watered without understanding biochemistry, and trusted without waiting for a peer-reviewed journal to say it was okay. Black seed oil, Nigella sativa, were sold in small, dark bottles from grocery stores in Black and Muslim neighborhoods, was taken by the teaspoon for respiratory strength, immune support, and general well-being. Modern clinical trials have validated its use for asthma. A double-blind randomized trial showed Nigella sativa oil brought partly controlled asthma patients to fully controlled status within 12 weeks. A meta-analysis across 4 randomized trials confirmed improvement in lung function scores. The active compound, thymoquinone, has documented anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and bronchodilatory properties. A 2022 systematic review confirmed it improves fasting blood glucose in diabetic patients. It was called folk medicine for decades. It is now the subject of serious pharmaceutical interest. Baking soda in a glass of water, half a teaspoon, are stirred until it disappeared, drunk for heartburn and stomach upset. Pennies, and the Phase 3 clinical trial called Stomach Still, published in 2023, found an 84.72% responder rate for bicarbonate versus 63.51% for placebo. Baking soda is on the WHO list of essential medicines. It was always real. They always knew the mustard plaster deserves its own moment. Dry mustard powder mixed with flour, 2 parts flour to 1 part mustard, combined with hot water into a paste, spread onto a piece of muslin cloth, then laid warm against a congested chest. The skin turned pink. The heat spread. Children complained. The science behind it is the same mechanism underlying every modern topical pain and congestion treatment on pharmacy shelves. Sinegrin in mustard converts to allyl isothiocyanate on contact with water, a counter-irritant that dilates blood vessels, increases circulation, and stimulates nerve endings. It is the molecular ancestor of menthol creams, capsaicin patches, and the entire class of modern topical rubefacents. Hippocrates used mustard poultices for lung conditions. The recipe was already 2,000 years old when grandmother spread it onto flannel. Cabbage leaves, chilled, pressed against swollen joints and engorged breasts, placed flat, left for hours, replaced when they wilted. The largest randomized controlled trial on this topic studied 227 mothers and found cold cabbage leaves significantly reduced breast hardness and pain at every measured time point compared to gel packs. Room temperature leaves were found equally effective. The cold was incidental. The sulfur-based compounds in cabbage carry documented antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties. Something from the refrigerator drawer, something any family could afford, was performing clinical trial-worthy results without anyone naming it medicine. Activated charcoal, drawn from burnt wood or charcoal tablets kept in medicine cabinets, was used for suspected poisoning and stomach upset. The concept felt primitive. What could black powder do against a toxin? It turns out, a great deal. A meta-analysis found activated charcoal reduced drug bioavailability by 69% when administered within 30 minutes of ingestion. Activated charcoal is now on the WHO list of essential medicines. It is the standard of care for poisoning in emergency departments worldwide. What grandmother understood intuitively, that charcoal drew things out, was directionally correct, even if the home preparation lacked the specific surface area of medical grade product. Malign tea, dried leaves steeped for 10 minutes, strained carefully to remove the fine plant hairs, drunk 3 times a day for coughs and congestion. Preclinical studies confirm antibacterial activity against Staphylococcus aureus, Klebsiella pneumonia, E. coli, and Staphylococcus epidermidis. The mucilage in mullein coats inflamed throat tissue, while saponins promote expectoration. Germany, which maintains the world's most rigorous herbal pharmacopoeia, has formally approved mullein for respiratory conditions. The human clinical trials are only beginning to catch up with the kitchen tradition. Comfrey leaves, crushed into a poultice for bruises and sprains and swollen joints, compared in clinical trials to diclofenac gel, the leading prescription anti-inflammatory, and found to perform comparably. The compound allantoin promotes cell regeneration. The compound rosmarinic acid reduces inflammation. Important to say clearly, comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids that make internal use genuinely dangerous, and the FDA ban on oral comfrey products was medically justified, but topically, on intact skin, for short-term use, the poultice worked. The caution was warranted. The remedy itself was not wrong. Onion poultices and honey and onion syrups for coughs and congestion. Onion contains quercetin at concentrations between 284 and 486 milligrams per kilogram, making it one of the richest dietary sources of a compound now used in pharmaceutical-grade anti-inflammatory and antihistamine preparations. The remedy was real. The delivery mechanism was improvised and brilliant. And then, at the end, the things that were genuinely dangerous: turpentine on a sugar cube, kerosene mixed into honey, sassafras root bark brewed into tea. Remedies that worked their way into black households through poverty and desperation, not ignorance, and that carried real toxicological risk. Turpentine poisoning can kill a child with as little as 15 milliliters. Kerosene aspiration causes lung hemorrhage. Sassafras oil was banned by the FDA in 1960 because of documented carcinogenic metabolites. These were not wisdom. These were the cost of having no other option, of living in communities where the hospital door said you were not welcome, and the only medicine available was what grew in the yard or sat in the shed. And that is the real story underneath all 25 of these remedies. Not just the science, not just the vindication. The real story is the world that made them necessary. In the 1960s, 31% of Southern hospitals refused to admit black patients under any circumstances. The median black household income was 55 cents on every dollar earned by white households. A doctor's visit cost $3 to $5, a full day's wages. The Tuskegee experiment was still active. The medical schools that trained black physicians had been systematically shuttered 50 years earlier. And so, in that closed-off world, a parallel system of medicine was built from what was available: honey from the shelf, garlic from the garden, castor oil from the drugstore, mustard from the pantry, aloe from the windowsill, cloves from the spice drawer, and knowledge passed from grandmother to granddaughter in the particular way that oral tradition preserves what institutions deny. The women who carried this knowledge, the granny midwives, the root workers, the grandmothers who had memorized dosages by feel and outcome, were called quacks and superstitious and backward. Margaret Charles Smith delivered over 3,000 babies in 35 years in Utah, Alabama, and never lost a single mother. Annie Lee Logan did the same in Mobile and lost one baby in 40 years. Then Alabama outlawed traditional midwifery in 1976, and the women who had kept communities alive for generations were threatened with jail. Today, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from childbirth complications than white women. Something was dismantled when it should have been honored. This is what gets lost when we reduce all of this to a list of home remedies. That behind every mason jar and every flannel cloth and every bitter teaspoon was a person who had been told, in 1,000 explicit and bureaucratic ways, that their life was not worth a hospital bed. And they responded by becoming their own pharmacists, their own physicians, their own healers. They built medicine from what they had, and they passed it down in the only way that was never segregated, in the warmth of a kitchen, in the low voice of someone who loved you, in the hands pressed against your chest in the dark while the vaporizer steamed and the blue jar sat on the nightstand and morning somehow always came. Thank you for spending this time with us. This walk through something real and important, something that belongs to a lot of us in ways deeper than we usually say out loud, means everything. If this stirred something in you, if you found yourself back in a kitchen you thought you'd forgotten, hit like. Share this with someone who grew up with these remedies, someone whose grandmother's hands they remember, and if you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be honored to have you here.